Thank you. Hi, dear colleagues, professors and guests. I'm very happy to welcome you to the first series of the GGG Academic Webinars. And we have selected to talk about a very important domain today that is in everybody's agenda, in all institutions, in all discussions across academia, and in all the fora that are related to teaching and learning. And this is nothing else than AI, of course. So today's webinar is dedicated to teaching with AI in higher education. And I want to sparkle the discussion, and then I will give the floor to our distinguished colleagues and guests who are experts in this field, by just asking some questions, and then it is up to them how they can tackle this and how they can comment further. So one of them is that, is AI today in academia an enemy or a threat? Then, is AI threatening teaching jobs and positions in institutions and universities? How we can use AI in teaching effectively and for providing added value to students, professors, and the institutions as well at the same time. And finally, what are the main ethical concerns that are associated with teaching and learning in regards to AI? So I think that these four questions, if you can say questions, are in everybody's mind when they're thinking today about how we can use AI in academia. So I want to give first the floor to Dr. Okan, then to Dr. Farsad, and then to Professor Tilman Lindberg, who is our external guest. And Dr. Aminpour can actually moderate the discussion. So, dear colleague, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Professor. Dr. Okan, if you are ready, I would like to ask you to share your file. Is it visible to all the audience? Would you please?
Can you see it?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, dear Professor Kouveliotis, dear Dr. Nilüfer, dear colleagues, dear participants, first of all, let me share that I'm very glad to be invited to this important event. It is really a pleasure for me to be with you today and talk about AI as a partner in teaching and learning in higher education. Now let's start about the arrival of a new era. When we consider how artificial intelligence is reshaping higher education, I think that it will be wise to begin with systems, platforms, infrastructures, and all other components of digital transformation. Nowadays, we hear a lot about AI, automation, data analysis, virtual campuses, and smart learning environments. For sure, all of these elements are important. They shape strategy, investment, and institutional planning in education. However, my intention today is to shift our attention a little closer to the main task of what we actually do as academics. Because I do believe that the deeper transformation concerns is about pedagogy itself. I want to bring the focus on something more basic, more fundamental, and more deeply connected to the true essence of higher education as we know. What I want to focus on is the changing pedagogical partnership between educators and artificial intelligence. In other words, how AI affects the relationship between educators and students, how it influences the rhythm and dynamic of that interaction, and how it opens new possibilities for the teaching and learning process. The current situation is not about replacing teachers or making the education a mechanical process. It is mostly neither a futuristic fantasy in which algorithms take over classrooms or humans. Instead, it is a situation about pedagogy in its fundamental and basic goal, how human beings learn and how human beings teach. and most of that, how AI becomes a collaborator in that journey. It's about seeing AI not as an external element, but as something that can be added into the structure of learning design and educational practice. On top of that, the new generation of students arrives with expectations shaped by continuous digital engagement. They process information differently, they are multitask naturally, and they expect fast delivery of information and interactivity. Not because they are inherently impatient, but because they grew up in environments where being responsive is the norm rather than being an exception. In this new education ecosystem, AI offers the potential to enhance the values that educators have always cared about, such as curiosity, engagement, dialogue, free and easy access to the information, and of course, intellectual growth. To that end, technological change can fortify rather than replace core academic values. That is the foundation of my perspective regarding today's topic. Actually, AI, if integrated with care and pedagogical focus, can become a partner rather than being help something else, an enemy, that helps us to save time, deepen learning, and reimagine what is possible in the classroom. Now let's continue with learner engagement. So let's start with the student's experience, because that is where the transformation is felt the most directly. For decades, education has been based on relatively static forms of content. But today, textbooks do not adapt to different levels of understanding. Lectures, even when delivered very successfully, proceed at the same rhythm for everyone in the room. Slide decks, PDFs, or handouts exist as fixed objects, frozen in time at the moment they are produced. Within the new ecosystem of education, we must be very flexible and fast for changing the curriculum. We all know from experience that students come to our classrooms with very different levels of preparation. Some arrive ready to go with complex theoretical frameworks. On the other hand, others are still struggling with foundational concepts. Some learn best through visual representations, others prefer verbal explanation. In a traditional one-to-many model, it is extremely difficult to respond. So all this type of different needs must be actually filled by personalized education. AI fundamentally changes this dynamic by allowing the content to behave more like a conversation than an object. It is possible to use AI to enable dynamic responsive content that adjusts to individual needs and learning trajectories. But I have to underline that it must be definitely with the condition for the content, especially for the sources, to be verifiable, real, and relevant. Instead of reading and listening, learners or students can now actively question, interact, challenge, reinterpret, and explore. In a scenario where they can use wisely AI-powered system, they can reach the explanation of a concept in simpler language. They can also ask to provide a case or a real-life example, or to show them the same idea through a diagram rather than a paragraph. And of course, this creates a learning environment in which the student is not a passive recipient, but an active element. Nowadays, with the means of AI, students can ask questions like, can you explain this part again? Or what is the difference between these two theories? Or they can ask, show me how this formula works in a real world example. This new opportunity offered by AI avoids social pressure that sometimes prevents students from asking questions in front of others. Of course, we can add many other possible scenarios to the add-ons of AI, like preparing quick quizzes or step-by-step explanation of typical problems. But at this point, let me underline something. This is a new station, and this new station doesn't diminish or decrease the educator's role, the educator's voice or importance. I believe that this is one of the most transformative shifts that AI brings to the higher education. The conversion of learning from one-way flow of information into a more responsive, interactive, and mostly personalized experience. Now, our next topic is about how the academic work is redefined. Having talked about the content, now let's focus on the educators. Academic life is filled with what we might be called invisible labor. And these are tasks that are essential for a course to run, but they don't have always the requirement to fulfill actually the intellectual and creative expertise of an academic. They include grading repetitive assignments, drafting multiple versions of teaching materials, managing administrative communication, writing routine feedback, and addressing to predictable student requests. Long story short, academics are nowadays drowning in paperwork. And I think you would agree with me on that. And this task occupies sometimes evenings, weekends, and the mental space that might be used otherwise for innovative course design or deeper engagement with students. At this point, AI can allow us to reorganize this type of workload. It can assist with the more repetitive aspects of grading, particularly for structured assignments, and it can help for generating draft feedback or addressing to predictable student questions. In other words, to help the academics, AI is capable of doing many repetitive tasks. I think that the crucial point is that by doing this task, AI doesn't replace educators. It just supports and helps. It allows the academics to focus on teaching, making research, and mentoring. To make this more concrete, let's think of a lecturer who teaches several large first-year courses. In the traditional model, much of their time might be consumed by marking or small group mentoring. In this model, AI is not an enemy, as I mentioned it before, but a collaborator of the academics that enables them to practice their role more meaningful by enhancing the educator's strategic, relational, and reflective contribution. One of the most important pillars of education is feedback. And feedback has always been one of the most powerful mechanisms in education and also one of the most challenging because it is very difficult to deliver consistently and at big numbers. Obviously, students depend on feedback to grow, to correct misunderstandings and mistakes, and to restructure their thinking. At the same time, meaningful feedback requires careful reading, thoughtful interpretation, and time. And AI reshapes these dynamics by providing immediate, personalized, and structured feedback. The educator then can allocate more time for other dialogues and complex evaluative comments. Let me underline that in this sense, AI acts actually as a first responder in the feedback ecosystem, so it is not the ultimate step. In this case, the educator becomes a kind of consultant who helps the student to improve the work. This is especially powerful in disciplines where students often struggle with early stages in foundations such as mathematics, coding, or academic writing in a second language. When implemented carefully, AI does not reduce the educator's voice in feedback. On the contrary, I think that it makes this voice more effective. Another concern about AI is, of course, the academic integrity. Once we begin talking about AI-generated explanations and AI-assisted feedback, academic integrity is a big concern, and for sure, many questions arise. However, the answer depends less on technology itself and more on how we design our pedagogical practices. When AI is integrated carefully into learning design, it can actually fortify academic legacy rather than undermine it. Naturally, this requires clear guidelines, and institutions must reinforce standards that will request critical reasoning, originality, and transparency. if we take these design processes seriously, AI can become an ally rather than being an opponent in this field of education. The challenge is to integrate AI responsibly while protecting academic concerns. While integrating the AI in education, we should also understand the learning patterns of the new generation. In other words, to fully evaluate why AI supported pedagogy is so powerful, we must also look closely who our students are today. The students entering our institutions have grown up in a world of constant connectivity. Many have never known a time without smartphones, search engines, and social media feeds. Their cognitive habits have been shaped by an environment in which information flows continuously and interaction is immediate. It doesn't mean that, of course, they cannot concentrate, nor that they are somehow less capable than previous generations. It means that their cognitive rhythm is just different. They are used to engaging with information in short explanations and combining multiple modes of engagement. In other words, the current cognitive patterns prioritize immediate interactivity. And I think that traditional learning environments often struggle to respond to these patterns. A 90-minute lecture in a dark room with PowerPoint presentations delivered at a fixed pace assumes a very particular way of paying attention. When students appear distracted in such settings, it's easy to interpret this in many different ways, but it may also be a mismatch between the environment and the cognitive habits they have developed over the years. And an AI-supported pedagogy approach can allow, at this point, actually to build a bridge between these new habits and the demands of higher education. AI can break down content into smaller adaptive pieces, allowing students to progress in different steps. While still being challenged, the AI platforms are now able to evaluate the performance of the students, and then they can adjust the next set of activities accordingly. Over time, this creates a rhythm of engagement for the students that feels natural within a digital lifestyle, while still oriented toward a high level of academic rigor and goal. What I try to say is that when used correctly, AI does not cause distraction. Instead, it respects students' learning patterns while guiding them toward deeper, more stable academic engagement. Now let's focus on the educator's changing identity. As AI becomes more integrated into teaching and learning, we must reflect carefully on what this means for the identity of the educator as well. If AI can provide explanations and what becomes then the academic, it is obvious that we should re-evaluate the educator's role. My point of view is that as academics, we will be needed more than ever, but in a slightly different configuration. AI can handle certain aspects of information, but it cannot understand cultural nuance, differences, or the human dimension of learning. Whatever AI will bring, human expertise will always stay essential. I believe that in the long term, educators will become the architects of learning rather than just the broadcasters of content. We will design the learning journey, selecting where AI will support, where human interaction is essential, and where reflection must be encouraged. In this evolving identity, the academic is also a role model of intellectual integrity, curiosity, and critical engagement. Students watch how we think, how we respond to uncertainty, and how we handle disagreement, and how we improve our own mindsets. To sum up, I think that AI ultimately enhances rather than decreasing or diminishing the educator's importance. Now, I would like to mention a new model of pedagogy that I will call hybrid. I think that if we bring all these topics that I mentioned previously together, it leads us towards a richer form of hybrid pedagogy in which human and machine intelligence collaborate and must collaborate. The educator orchestrates, synchronizes the overall learning environment, while AI personalizes engagement for the students. And in such a model, knowledge is not a simple delivered content from teacher to student. It is something which is co-constructed through a dynamic interaction between human dialogue and AI-supported platforms, as well as the students' own engagements. This hybrid pedagogy that I suggest, by offering multiple pathways through content, can support students with different levels. It can also allow the educators to focus their energy on the new learning experience. This new approach can make the institutions to think differently about time and space. This new model expands also learning beyond classroom boundaries. The institutions can reach the opportunity to become less a place where information is delivered, but more a network of experiences. The topic of integrating AI to pedagogy is huge, wide, but I think that I have to move towards the conclusion. But before that, I want to mention also one final point. Adopting AI in higher education is not about reducing education to algorithms. It's about fortifying what we have always valued the most: meaningful interaction, deep understanding, intellectual exploration, and human connection. Technology can become pedagogically meaningful only when it serves these goals that I mentioned. AI allows us to return in some ways to the fundamental purpose of education, helping students grow intellectually, emotionally, and academically. It can also allow us to allocate time for mentorship, to design richer feedback sessions, to respond more effectively to the diverse students with different levels, and to create environments where curiosity can explore. To sum up, I think that we are not entering a post-human era in education. We are entering a new era that I will define as post-static era, in which learning becomes more personalized, more interactive. And it's a bit paradoxical, but even more human when correctly supported by machine intelligence. If we approach AI with care, with ethical awareness, and with a strong pedagogical approach, it can become a precious partner in teaching and learning. Institutions must approach AI as a partner with lots of academic possibilities. Finally, I think that AI has the potential to elevate what is the most human in higher education: connection, curiosity, and intellectual challenge. Thank you very much for listening, and greetings from Hamburg. I hope that I could answer Professor's questions about this dilemma of considering AI as an enemy or as a collaborator.
Thank you very much, Dr. Okan. It was a wonderful presentation. Although I know that you compacted your presentation into this file to be able to follow the time. Thank you very much. It was very effective and valuable. I would like to ask if the audience has any questions or any comments on this presentation. Please feel comfortable to raise your hands or start speaking. Unmute yourselves. Any questions? Any comments? I think that everything was crystal clear, and the audience probably are waiting to join Dr. Farshad's presentation. To sum up, probably in the end, we can have a question and answer or a conversation with three of you. For the privacy policy, I should mention again that this meeting is going to be recorded, just for your information. Dr. Farshad, now the stage is yours, and please start your presentation. We are waiting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nilufar. First of all, I want to express my sincere gratitude to Professor Kyriakos Kouveliotis for founding such a valuable webinar series. And now we have a special focus on artificial intelligence. And we can deal with a kind of AI-powered ecosystem. First of all, I will start with a strategical framework. Why, and from environmental perspective, why we need to define a kind of infrastructure, how we can think of a kind of governance, analytics, and protocols, how we can have a cross-functional actually leadership model in order to have a better understanding of AI as well as AI transformation in the modern world, how we can shape an ecosystem, how we can think of a kind of change management scenario in order to think about the future of higher education in the framework of AI and actually digital transformation. First of all, I will start from a very general perspective, why we need to have a strategical framework and what does it mean to have a governance, analytics, and protocols. For this purpose, I will start with a very good definition. An AI-powered ecosystem is a kind of integrated systems where machine learning infrastructures are dealing with student learning processes. And the most important objective function is to deal with scalability, with adaptability, and hybrid human AI collaboration. So you can obviously see that in such a scenario, we have human learning, we have machine learning, and we have adaptation of machine learning into human learning and reflection of human learning into machine learning. This is how we can define a kind of ecosystem. In such an ecosystem, you can obviously see that we need some experts from the domains of artificial intelligence, and especially from machine learning, natural language processing, and speech processing. And we also have some experts who are educationalists, who are educational psychologists, who are educational modelers. And they guys, actually, they can come together in order to think about scalability, adaptability, and hybrid human AI collaboration. If I want to be deeper into such an ecosystem, I will define 4 important components. In fact, if I want to define a kind of AI ecosystem in the context of higher education, I need to model 4 important components. The first component is technology infrastructure. This is the most important one because I need to be adapted to technology. Technology is my tool. Technology is my language. Technology is my system. According to technological analysis, I need to have a data governance and I need to have a kind of, overseeing scenario based on how the data is being managed based on my technological advancements. The third component is called analytic systems. Here, I will deal with data analytics. I'm thinking about predictive analytics. I'm thinking about justification. I'm thinking about the logic. And I also have some institutional protocols. Here, we need some educational leaders, and we need some actually guys who are from the humanity perspective, are thinking about such a kind of adaptation. So my friends, please have this picture in your mind that we have 4 important components: technology, governance, analytics, and institutional protocols. I will be much more specific on all of them. So let me say, if I'm thinking about the technology infrastructure, it means that the primary role that I'm dealing with is data and machine learning backbone. Our experts in data analytics and computer science know very well that when I'm thinking about data and ML from the analytical and systematic perspective, it means that how I can enable a scalability, but I am also thinking about integration. This is a very technical word. That's why our computer scientists, for example, thinking about algorithmic, you can see that the first concept, the first technology was much more about what is happening in machines. The second one, what is happening in humans according to what we have in machines. According to the three, we are thinking about how the first and the second are interacted together. And according to the fourth, institutional protocols, we are thinking about how we can ensure long-term viability and how we can deal with AI within higher educational strategical ethos. This is a kind of policy alignment that we have in such a model. That's why if I'm thinking about the futuristic aspects of ecosystems in the context of higher education, we need 4 different categories of actually knowledge in order to support such a development. This is something that I have designed in order to think about such an ecosystem. This is the ecosystem that we have. As you can see, we have 3 categories of concepts: the orange one, the blue one, and the green one. The orange one is simply talking about how learning process is being shaped, how humans learning and how machines learning, and how this learning is actually interconnected. According to the blue category, I'm thinking about the technical advancement of such an ecosystem. And according to the green one, I'm thinking about educational aspects of such a kind of advancement. Now you can see that the blue one, the green one are highly interconnected together in order to finally support the student machine learning ecosystem. That's why, my friends, if we are thinking about the future of higher education using AI and digital transformation, we need especially to divide this huge project into 2 blue and green, and we need some leaders who can analyze blue and green and who can make a decision based on what we can do. I will be more specific. So let me be much more specific on the technical domain. On the technical domain, as a lot of our computer science and data science friends know, we have some very important functions in technical aspects of artificial intelligence. Something like adaptive algorithms, something like natural language processing, something like predictive analytics, and something like modular platforms. These are, in fact, 4 very important concepts based on which we can think about the technical development of artificial intelligence. For example, according to the first, adaptive algorithms, we can increase educational model by personalized models of education in knowledge construction and learning. By using NLP interfaces, natural language processing, we can especially focus on communication and conversations between students and academics. According to predictive analytics, we are thinking about the reflection of learning and how we can have a much more systematic and procedural perspective to the concept of actually analytics. And according to modular platforms, we are thinking about the adaptive learning and consequently adaptive pedagogies. Now, for example, my friends, I bring some very important examples here. Already in some very famous universities around the world, like University of Oxford, like Cambridge, like Harvard, they are developing such models. That how, for example, we can go by deep knowledge tracing, how we can use large language models in order to create a kind of loop between humans and machines. Or how, for example, we are thinking about the explainability regarding SHAP and LIME. These are also some models based on data analytics and predictive analytics. So this is a technical perspective. What I want to bring here is these very important concepts: adaptive, natural language processing and understanding, predictive analytics, and modular platforms. Now you have a good picture of such an ecosystem regarding the concepts of green, blue, and orange. Please all the time have it in your mind because this is our reference in this model. How we can think about cross-functional leadership models for AI transformation. In fact, until now, we said what are the components of such an ecosystem? What are the biotic and abiotic concepts of such a model? In fact, the biotic ones are the colorful ones, and the abiotic ones are how these are reflected in educational system. Now I want to say that we need to define a kind of leadership model. What does it mean? It means that we need to organize ecosystem integration by uniting three important faculty or department or sections in our system. The first one is IT and technical. The second one is academic faculty. And the third one is administration and operational, actually, departments inside some school. In fact, we are going to transform isolated structures into some very strong systems that can be adopted to AI-driven innovation. There are a lot of models, my friends, for leadership. Our experts in leadership, and actually especially from the institutional perspective and the governing perspective, they know that we have so many models of leadership. But we can say that there are three models of leadership that can be very good here. Of course, each can have some positive or negative aspects. And I really encourage you, my friends, to write some articles on these domains regarding your framework of higher education. If you're a professor of marketing, you can think about how I can define a kind of model for marketing analytics using a kind of leadership analytics in such a higher educational model. The first model that is very good in such an ecosystem is hierarchical model of leadership. You're all familiar with hierarchical model. The most important characteristic is centralized controlling of the strategic alignment, relying all the models and the components. In such a model, we have a top-down governance. The higher is actually covering the next one and go up, go up, go up until the head of the organization. The second one is distributed, actually. In distributed, we have a kind of much more power under departments and under sections. So this is according to the philosophy of product management. We may call it departmentalization and local adaptation of the learning scenario. This is somehow much more bottom-up insight rather than the top-down of the hierarchical. The third one is collaborative. Inside collaborative, I would say that collaborative is much more clear when we are having a comparison to matrix organizations in human domains. Here, we have a horizontal networks of shared expertise. We are thinking about the cross-cutting innovation, creativity, and resilience. According to what I have visualized here, you would say that there are three different models, and as you can obviously see, each model of leadership can touch all three categories of blue, orange, and green. My friends, this is super important to make a balance. A leadership model cannot have a very significant focus, for example, on the blue, on the technical, and get out of the orange or the green one. That's why this is also another leadership activity that I need to make an overall balance between all three models of all three components of my ecosystem. That's why a good leader knows how to make a kind of overall equivalence and overall analytics for such a development. There are some challenges for leadership, as all systems have such actually challenges. The first one is cultural resistance. We all know very well cultures cannot accept. Why? Because of values, because of norms. People who are coming from the social science and the cultural sciences know very well that sometimes culture relying on some values cannot accept such a new model or new development. That's why we need to be much more stronger. Maybe we need to create a kind of trust by some good scenarios, and maybe we need to show them that how such a model can be adopted to their culture. The second challenge is expertise gaps. A lot of, we have a lot of components. Each component needs an expert. I cannot have 90, I cannot cover 90% of my needs and then say, okay, for example, this part of the green section is not satisfied. No, I need to make an overall balance, and I need to satisfy all the needs of all components of all parts of my ecosystem. The third one is actually resource constraint. Again, this is the biggest challenge for all companies and organizations and models. I need to have a good resource, human, machine, money, material, and information. These five are the most important resources in all scenarios. Okay, now I'm going to be much more focused on interinstitutional AI ecosystem. Now we said how we can have a kind of AI-based ecosystem for higher education in each institution, but how we can think about interinstitutional AI ecosystem. Partnerships extend ecosystems beyond single institutions. Why? Because they create shared infrastructures that amplify resources and standardize practices for collective advancement. This is something that all of academic leaders are having a special focus on, especially when they want to have a much more technical language and technical vocabulary. There are relational extensions when I'm thinking about interinstitutional ecosystems, like connecting institutions at meta level. We have experts here we have professors who are thinking about just about the connecting institutions. Sometimes we are thinking about the sharing computation data and models. We have experts. Sometimes we need to feed local analytics into global standards. This is a very hot topic. Sometimes we want to turn solo work into shared progress. Sometimes we have actually a pool of research and development, and we are thinking about the risk analytics. These are all the matters that when we are thinking about inter-operational aspects of connections between different institutions, we will face. So, my friends, we will go for resource analytics, we go for knowledge exchange, and we go for transformation of competitive landscapes into collaborative ecosystems. These are, of course, the secondary actually approach to the most important aspects of the ecosystem. For example, some examples in such a context like university AI hubs that now we are creating, or for example, mitigating fragmentation across the field, or enabling scalable benefits for all participants. This is a general framework that, okay, how model actually this university can be interconnected together, relying on the cultural values regarding the data that they bring from the market, and actually considering the blue, the orange, and the green aspects of the development. I'm going to actually terminate. We need some standards for interoperability, for equity, and for scalability. I would say that all leadership models for interinstitutional ecosystems are having a very special focus on these three important concepts. And in fact, a standardization of such a concept based on such an ecosystem that we have. Okay, after all of this, we need to have in mind that we need to change. We need to change. This is a very hot topic. All the time we need to change. Today and next week and next week and next week and next year, we need to change. That's why we need to navigate ecosystem transition, and we need to address resistances to ensure a smooth AI integration and sustain adaptability. So we need to be prepared all the time. We need to implement, and we need to actually have a special focus on sustainability and on keeping ourselves alive, protecting ourselves over time. Readiness is also super important. Readiness evaluates ecosystem maturity, identifying gaps in components and relationships for targeted enhancements. These are all, again, based on the dimensions of infrastructure, governance, and culture. All the time we need to review it and we need to think about the developments. Okay, final words. AI is the new relational fabric for higher education and fabric of higher education. Leadership, partnership, and change must operate as a single recursive system. Resilience is built through distributed governance, not rapid adoption. Equity and explainability are non-negotiable foundations, not optional virtues. The future belongs to those universities, those institutions that believe in such a concept. They co-evolve with rather than merely deploy algorithmic intelligence and machine intelligence. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Farshad, for this informative presentation. It was very nice. Thank you very much. I think that
Yes, Dr. Farshad, thank you very much. This was a very insightful presentation that also opened up a few perspectives that I'm not so familiar with personally, as I guess, in which kind of people will channel knowledge into AI systems. Can you elaborate?
Yeah, very good. Thank you very much for your question. Actually, this leadership model has a very special focus on ecosystem development. I mean, we can have a leadership for the, for the development of just the technical aspects, the blue parts. We can have a leadership like whatever we have under faculties. For example, we have a faculty of computer science and we are developing the technical aspects of something or the educational aspects of something. But when it comes together, especially as I mentioned by the beginning, we have human learning, we have machine learning or machine intelligence, we have adaptation of machine learning into human learning, and we have reflection of human learning into machine learning. These four concepts together are super complicated. That's why this leadership is having a general look over all these four concepts. What is the meaning of C1 in comparison to C2? What is the meaning of C2 in comparison to C3? When a good leader has a very good knowledge of humanistic and machine-based approach in such a model, it can be adopted and level by level, it go to the higher levels. So we start from departments, then we go to the institutions, and then we go to the societies. This is a general model that we have in mind, but of course it needs higher work and more developments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments on this presentation? Since the topic is an ongoing topic, I think that even if we have another webinar in January, we should discuss new topics. If we do not have...
hope for.
Yeah, of course. If we do not have any other points to be added at the moment, I would like to invite Professor Tillman to share his screen with us and go for his presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, now it's my turn. Thank you very much to start with for the opportunity to share a few thoughts on this topic of AI in higher education. And I was asked a bit to talk about the topic of AI in assessment. And then I suggested, why don't I talk about this topic of constructive alignment? The impact of AI and constructive alignment. And why did I suggest this? Because it's a very simple but a very convincing principle by which we can evaluate good curriculum design. And I think if you think about the if we now discuss the topic of impact of AI on curriculum design, you need to have some criteria, kind of what do we want to generate, what do we want to protect. And I think constructive alignment here is a helpful concept. Yeah, this is like the starting point. Let me now go a bit into my content. First of all, we heard already the controversies or the perspectives, the different perspectives on AI in higher education on a very basic level. Should we get it in or keep it out? If I understand my kind of the two reference before me well, then they are clearly on the getting in side. Nevertheless, not everybody in higher education would agree with that, you know. And you mentioned this can be culturally, but maybe there are also some rationales behind that. Yeah, and in this talk, I will explore at least one or two of them, and hopefully in a balanced perspective. Secondly, AI in teaching, is it assisting? Is it complementing? Is it substituting? Yeah, is the professor less important? Do we need also less professors in future maybe than in the past? Or is it more complementing? Can the professor basically enrich his availability of teaching content to students? Or is it assisting? Is it simply helping, making us more efficient in what we are doing? And then also in learning, actually, does it support learning? Maybe what I should add here to this point, is it adapting to new cognitive styles, to new learning styles, or it may even destroy learning? Yeah, I mean, this is actually also an important question. So we will explore a bit in this whole framework of topics. So the main question for me is, what is the impact of artificial intelligence on curriculum design? Yeah, and again, the concept I want to use to measure good curriculum design is this whole idea of constructive alignment. Yeah, what does constructive alignment actually mean? I make it very quick. Yeah, it says we have three elements to look at in curriculum design. First, our intended learning outcomes, our ILOs. Yeah, what do we want students to acquire through the learning journey? Then our teaching and learning activities. That's actually our pedagogy. Yeah, what do we take our students through? Is it a classical lecture? Is it a workshop? Is it a case study? Is it some hybrid teaching, including online, including maybe AI-guided teaching, etc.? And then in the end, the assessment tasks. Yeah, the assessment tasks in the end are there to measure the achievement of the ILOs, of the intended learning outcomes, but also, keyword here is formative assessment, yeah, to enable and to support the engagement with the TLAs, the teaching learning activities better. Yeah, so the three areas, ILOs, TLAs, and ATs, that we have to keep in mind and that we have to constructively align to build a good curriculum. Yeah, so from a schematic point of view, it looks a bit like this triangle. We have our ILOs, you know, they inform our TLAs, and then they again should inform our assessment tasks, our ATs. Yeah, now, of course, there's a huge complexity of design opportunities that we can work with. Yeah, ILOs, of course, are strongly linked to knowledge. And as we all know, knowledge can be either declarative, yeah, or in this terminology, functioning. It can be about the facts, or it can be about the skills, the process, the doing, yeah, the knowing or the doing. Both actually is knowledge in a certain way. And usually ILOs come along with certain verbs, instructing verbs, yeah, that either lead students more into the level of acquiring declarative knowledge, like the facts, the knowing, and the functioning sides of knowledge, the doing, yeah, the counting, the applying, the reflecting. Here are some examples on the slide. And the good thing is, once we have defined our ILOs with such words, it's also quite good to look now for teaching and learning activities that enable doing these words. Yeah, so if we want our students to learn to describe English literature in the 15th century, then we can think about activities that help them into being able to describe them, yeah, or describing them. Likewise, if we want students to reflect English literature in the 15th century, then we should find activities that bring them in position of reflecting. So activities should basically correspond to these instructing words that come along with our ILOs, which is quite a beautiful design principle for curriculum. And then our activities can be either informing or performing. Yeah, it can be more, lectures, inputs, it can be also online inputs, or they can be engaging, where students actually do something like case study analysis, simulation games, business model developments, role plays, etc. Yeah, and you see that each of these activities reflects either declarative or functioning knowledge in one way or the other, and the better the alignment, the better the design, in a sense. Our assessment now is designed, or needs to be designed, to now double check, do our students attain the knowledge that we have defined in our intended learning outcomes? Yeah, and we can also say there's a bit of an formative element, formative assessment. Yeah, this is now this level here, where basically also assessments can give feedback to students how well did they study so far, are there rooms for improving maybe certain activities, so they can also help students to become better in their learning journey, in their TLAs, so to say. Yeah. So once we bring all these three areas into alignment, then we have a constructively aligned curriculum. Yeah. And my question now is, what is now the impact actually of artificial intelligence on a constructively aligned curriculum design? Yeah, we have the three elements here: the ILOs, the TLAs, the TAs, and then the overall impact. Yeah, and I've tried to incorporate basically these four levels in this talk. So let's first discuss the impact of artificial intelligence on the internal learning outcomes. Yeah, and here I want to make it a bit quick. Yeah, we have on the one hand here cross-domain knowledge that is now being embraced in ILOs and into curricula. We call this on the foundation level AI literacy. Yeah, there's actually a lot of research about AI literacy. What is that? Yeah, how can we build this? Yeah, and this is relevant not only for computer scientists or for business students, but actually for every student who is being prepared for a world in which AI becomes kind of normal. But then there are also a little bit higher level thinking about AI, critical and reflective knowledge about AI, for example, on the societal impact. In my perspective, it's very important to think also about innovation and the role of humans in a world where AI plays an increasing role, but also the topic of personal usage and a reflective practice of AI, which is not that trivial, as we will find out throughout this talk. Furthermore, that there's domain-specific knowledge that is to be integrated into our ILOs, but this is then unique to peculiar programs or disciplines like marketing. Yeah, how does now AI play a role in marketing or in accounting? Or of course, the basics of AI engineering, which you do in computer science, software engineering, etc. I want to focus, of course, on the cross-domain knowledge. Yeah, because on the other domains, this will be more specific to the peculiar disciplines. I want to highlight a little bit this concept of AI literacy. Here's a nice concept from NG et al. 2021, who defined 4 elements of AI literacy. Yeah, AI literacy should enable students to know and understand AI, use and apply AI, evaluate and create AI, but then also AI ethics, yeah, fairness, accountability, data safety. Yeah, questions like this would play here a role. Yeah. Beyond this, or beyond the topic of foundational AI literacy, also there's a focus on reflecting upon societal impact of AI. That's now basically a distinction that Leinfeld 2025 brought up, and developing reflective practice about AI. And I must say these 3 levels of AI, AI integration in cross-domain, sorry, I have to repeat myself. These 3 levels of integrating AI into cross-domain elements of curricula, I find quite useful. Yeah, on the one hand, thinking about foundational AI literacy. Secondly, on more the critical elements of implementing implementing AI in society. And then thirdly, developing a reflective practice of using AI in your personal life. Yeah, which means like being aware of how you use this and what does it do to you, what does it do to others. Yeah, how can you leverage value, but how can you also protect yourself from potential harmful elements? Yeah, talking here about addictive patterns, over-reliance, and also something that has been described by these authors here, cognitive deficiency. Yeah, this is a much studied, much discussed study from the MIT that came out this year. And I don't want to go too much into detail here, but they found actually out something that many of us can intuitively, I think, confirm, that if you indeed use AI instead of your own thinking, you will develop your cognitions less. Yeah, and you will have less cognitive development. Therefore, your future development of human skills will be diminished if you replace human thinking with artificial intelligence or artificial algorithmic thinking, so to say. Yeah, you can look into the details here. The slides will be available. It's quite an interesting study. It's quite a thorough study. But this is a concept that needs to be taken seriously indeed by us, because we don't want students to move into cognitive deficiency because they just don't do things themselves anymore, knowing that we work at institutions that are dedicated to human intelligence as well. Yeah, but irrespective of this, this is a bit of an overview on the topic of how AI impacts the intended learning outcomes of university programs around the globe. Yeah, so in the cross-domain level. Okay, so if we now talk about the teaching learning activities, yeah, basically we have to distinguish two different things. First, AI systems as artifacts, as objects of inquiry in our teaching and learning. Yeah, this means that we study AI, we look at what does it do kind of in certain situations. We look at maybe AI bots and what output they produce to similar prompts. We compare differences. So we make basically AI systems as the object of inquiry and also of reflective practice in our classrooms. Secondly, we need to talk about AI systems as process tools, yeah, to increase both effectiveness and efficiency of teaching and learning. Yeah, so on the one hand, we talk about kind of objects of study. On the other hand, we talk about AI systems that are implemented in our actual processes of teaching and learning to increase both effectiveness and efficiency. Yeah, so two different areas. Yeah, classical objects of teaching and learning, yeah, can be hardware. If you talk about robotics, can be software. If you talk about AI bots, etc. It can be ready-made AI agents, yeah, that we just can draw upon, or can be just reflecting about this, what they call plugged here. So if you have a discussion round about the use of AI in business, in innovation, in society, in politics, yeah, then it would be more of an unplugged situation. So there are different levels of implementing AI as an artifact in our education. Now, if we move on to the next level, how we can implement them as process tools in teaching and learning. There, I'm quoting here a study from Crompton and Burke. They did a very kind of comprehensive literature review. The study is from 2023, so later articles are not included, but they are basically describing 5 domains of applying AI in higher education as process tools, interpreting their content. First of all, in assessment evaluation. Yeah. Secondly, in predicting. Yeah. Thirdly, as assisting. Yeah. In teaching and learning. Yeah. Then fourthly, and that's kind of the next level, as intelligent tutoring systems, therefore replacing professors or tutors on certain levels in certain areas. And then on the 5th level, in the area of data analytics.
Okay. That was not AI for sure.
This was human intervention. Yeah.
Yes, please.
So management, and last but not least, we can look at the larger part of data analytics and how we can use them basically for managing student learning and larger educational patterns. Yeah, so 5 areas of implementing AI in higher education as process tools. Yeah, and each of these levels, I need to say, opens a lot of opportunities for innovation, for trying things out, and I believe connects also quite to what my previous what the reference before me were talking about. Okay, so what I would like to conclude on this topic of AI in teaching and learning activities is that AI systems as artifacts, as objects of study are essential for meeting AI-related ILOs. There's the question about this. So the application, the use of AI as a stimuli for studying, as an object of study, as an object of inquiry is essential. When we now talk about process tools, there are these 2 levels, effectiveness and efficiency. Yeah, and effectiveness, of course, is goal achievement. Yeah, so to what extent does it help us to enable students to reach their ILOs better? Yeah, which is a very worthwhile discussion. However, efficiency is mainly an input-output ratio. Yeah, that we talk about, okay, to what extent can we get the same output with less input? Yeah, by automatizing, for example, certain tasks. Yeah, and here we have to indeed talk a little bit about this topic of cognitive deficiency that can come up if we kind of replace human learning with digital with the digital version of this, or as Kosmina also says, if we move into this trade-off between immediate convenience and long-term skill development. Yeah, so this is actually a big topic. Yeah, and if I talk about my classroom, I would say most students, yeah, are a little bit on the convenience side. Yeah, they don't use AI in the classroom because they want to explore the tool more, but they want to take the easier way forward. Yeah, and by this, of course, move into what Kosmina I'll call cognitive deficiency, and you can also observe this actually in the outcomes in the classroom, which has an impact, a negative impact on human intelligence. Yeah, because education has a strong impact, of course, on the development of human intelligence. Yeah, and in this area, we need to be aware that this is not what we want to do when we want to embrace AI in the classroom. Okay, so now the last point, AI's impact on assessment tasks. 3 questions here. Yeah, first of all, does AI enrich the range of potential assessment types? For sure it does. Yeah. Secondly, does AI enable further automatization of assessments? The efficiency topic. Yeah, for sure it does. It opens up the whole world of qualitative assessments, the automatization of qualitative assessments, which was before and only possible in quantitative fields. And last but not least, does AI impact the validity of our assessments? Yeah, and this is absolutely essential to answer if we want to protect the constructive alignment of our curriculum design. So a few thoughts on this. Yeah, so what type of assessment formats do we have? Usually we can talk about examinations and coursework. Examinations usually are controlled environments in which the process of producing a certain outcome and the outcome itself is controlled and assessed. Yeah, coursework assignments usually are assignments which control only the outcome, but not the process on which they are produced. Yeah, which in the olden days where you didn't have more tools maybe than the library around or illegally a ghostwriter, yeah, there was validity, of course, as long as there was trust towards the student. But in our digital world, not only with AI, but already with Google and plagiarism, I mean, that's why we use Turnitin and all that. Coursework, so to say, has a bit of a validity challenge that has been increased, of course, with AI. So the question is also, to what extent can AI help us to increase the validity of coursework assignments? Yeah, by, for example, evaluating the process in which they have been produced. Yeah, something with which Turnitin, for example, failed. Yeah, as they are now removing the AI score, the AI analytic tool from their services, as I learned about what they're going to do next March around this time. Yeah, so now what different impact forms, what type of forms do we find in assessment evaluation in the top AI impacted? Yeah, and here again, these 5 groups from Crumpton and Burke, automatic assessments, now with this huge advantage of being able to automatize also qualitative assessments, yeah, which is, I think, yeah, for business schools, a strong efficiency driver. We can use them in test generation. We can use them for feedback generation. We can use them also for review online engagement, something at GISMA. What we do, for example, we have quite a strong emphasis on online content, and AI tools could indeed help you to maybe offer better online content, also what kind of we discussed already today, but also to evaluate better students' engagement with online content. But this also increased the validity, again, of online-based assessments. Yeah, so there's actually opportunity in that. The 5th category here, I don't want to mention too much. Because of time, let me maybe jump this here. The main point here is, again, is the question of validity. Yeah, can we ensure that we have indeed a constructively aligned curriculum design by implementing AI technologies into the curriculum? And you really have to look into the details. Yeah, and I would like to point out 2 question marks that we should think about. The first is, again, do we replace human cognitive development with artificial development? If yes, then we basically disrupt our journey towards constructively aligned curricula. Yeah, that's the first. So this is something where we should be conservative about, yeah, in all questions of modernizing our curriculum. Yeah. Secondly, what happens to student cultures if feedback is given automatically and not by people? Yeah, because it impacts, of course, very strongly the teacher-student relationship. And to what extent do human-to-human relationships matter in education, or to what extent can they substitute by automatization? Yeah, that's actually a question mark that I would like to just pose here for the group to think about. And but I think if we think about these 2 questions beyond this, there will be a lot of opportunity in this field to protect constructive alignment and to basically increase even the effectiveness of our learning journeys. So with this, I may conclude, yeah, human intelligence versus artificial intelligence versus or with. Yeah, I think we have to discover the with, but we also have to discover the versus. Yeah, because in the one area we have to implement, in the other area we have to protect. Yeah, and I think doing both means to find the balanced approach in the future, which I think is the right way to go. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Thielmann, for this wonderful presentation that you offered to us, full of information that we need to think about all of them.
Contribute to the critical thinking of the students, especially I'm teaching to foundation year students, and in my situation I'm dealing with students are in the first year or first chapter of their academic life. But in this case, do you think that it's has a positive impact in terms of critical thinking, or a negative impact for students who may over-rely on using this AI tool, especially that we have now specialized AI tools only for scientific and academic research? I'm not talking about ChatGPT or the normal platform, but platforms like Illicits that it's specially designed for scientific research?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I would first say, you know, for me, the paradigm and the justification of universities is the development of human intelligence. Yeah, I think that's what justifies our existence, that we build humans in becoming smarter. Of course, smarter in dealing with the world around us, which includes AI. Yeah. So I think the answer to the question is what happens in the brain of the students when they use AI. You know, does something happen that builds cognition, or does something happen that replaces cognition? Yeah, and I know many cases where using AI replace cognition, and I would strongly argue it's not good for universities to encourage and enable that, because they will do this enough in the working world, and we have to build smart students that compete also with artificial intelligence in the future, because it's not only corporations, also competition. Yeah, software development companies sack whole QA teams because they say I can do it for them. Maybe keep one or two who supervise the process. That's competition. Yeah, only the smart ones stay. Yeah, also if you now go into the working world, juniors have difficulties getting jobs. Yeah, seniors have it easier to find jobs. Yeah, one reason is recession. The other reason also is that they say, okay, the simple tasks, we can also use AI systems to do that. Yeah. So human intelligence is essential for winning in the future. Absolutely. Not only for, I think, protecting humanity, yeah, in the face of artificial intelligence, but also very practically for a career in the future. Yeah. So, and in a sense, universities are the last stop. Yeah, we are the moment, we are the last 3 years, the last 1 year before they go into the working world. And so we should really protect cognitive development. So the question is, what happens in the brain? If something happens towards cognitive development, like reflective skills, comparing, contrasting, critiquing, I think then it's a good skill to do. But if it means simply that people don't use the brain as much as they would without, then I would rather say we should discourage that. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Doctor.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Yes, please, Martin. It's your turn.
Thank you very much, Professor, for the insight. My question is about narrowing down the AI strategies and tools. As we can see, there are, like example, like various types of AI tools, strategies that we can, for example, find on the internet, or maybe using any kind of, for example, tool. So are there any kind of frameworks or maybe guidelines to narrow down these AI tools and also strategies for specific purposes? Let's say for hospitality management, for example, department, there should be, like, for example, kind of specific guidelines, or maybe for the healthcare, or for the, let's say, business faculty. If yes, what are, let's say, some of the specific strategies and tools that could be used for the students of business management or international business, or, for example, let's say, hospitality management? Thank you very much.
I would think that's a question to all of us, yeah, who spoke, in a sense. Yeah. I mean, I could maybe start. I mean, I don't know so well domain-specific tools. Yeah. So if I ask about healthcare and hospitality, I would not be the right person to really advise on this. What I can say is, from a constructive alignment perspective, is, it really makes sense to think about what is the intended learning outcome, and what activity can be designed to take students through this journey that helps them to attain that. It's a very simple, generic principle, but if we keep this in mind, I think we will be able to distinguish tools that are helpful and distinguish tools that are just replacing the actual learning. And if the replacing happens, yeah, I can tell you students has convenience advantages, but won't have skill advantages. Yeah, and that's not what they're here for. We're here at an education institution. Yeah, but if they're building exactly the skills they need for your discipline, let's say in digital marketing or in healthcare, yeah, e-health. I mean, there are a lot of e-health applications that are highly relevant to doctors' trainings these days. Then, of course, it needs to be in the curriculum, because that's preparing them for the working world to come. But this alignment has to be there. If it's not aligned, then it may be not really useful.
Thank you, Dr. Okan. Do you have any comments on this question?
Well, actually, for our faculty, we have lots of platforms offering different tools, skills to our students to ease their work. But from a wider perspective, I do believe that we already had this discussions regarding the information and knowledge 20 years ago, maybe even maybe 25 years ago with the arrival of internet to the education. So the students already think that they can get the knowledge, not the information, but the knowledge, just watching a YouTube video. And it's a kind of natural selection regarding the question of Mr. Hani. So it is going to be also the same for AI. So the students who will have the possibility or the opportunity to use their critical thinking actual skills will survive in the environment created by AI. Otherwise, as Professor Tillman mentioned, they won't be able to be actually successful in the job market. Critical thinking will always remain as the main human actually skill or asset versus the AI. But as referring to the last slide of Professor Tillman, versus or actually with, I will say together. With AI, actually we should create a new kind of critical thinking methods for the students. Most of the times we are actually omitting the fact that our students, the new generation, is digital native. So when I was a student at the university, so it was like in the Middle Ages, I remember that we had to make an application to use the computer at the computer lab, because at that time only few students had computers. So we had the first ever mobile phones in our classrooms, and we had a reaction when they were checking their SMS messages, not even instant messages. So nowadays we see students in our classes with 3 different screens and still listening to us. So I think the curricula, the institutional regulations, as well as the academics are also improving their skills, their regulations, their approaches, but they are a bit slower than the technology and the learning patterns of the new generation. The new generation has a completely different motivation of learning that we should actually find some means of aligning it with the AI. So I think it's not about the technology, but it's about our approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Volkan. Dr. Farshad, do you have any comments that you want to add?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Actually, just one point regarding the question came from Martin and the answer of Professor Tillman. I absolutely agree with Professor Tillman that first of all, we need to know the context and the framework. For example, when Professor Tillman is speaking about learning outcomes, it means that we have a kind of pedagogical perspective to this concept, and our measurement is based on the comparison that we have using our learning outcomes. So first of all, we need to identify the context or the framework based on which we are analyzing such an enhancement and advancement. Is it from the perspective of pedagogies? Is it from the perspective of cognitive science? Is it from the perspective of cultures? For example, if it's a matter of culture, we are having values of cultures as a scale based on which we want to have a measurement and a comparison. If this is a kind of data analytics model, for example, we focus on the average of data and we are making a comparison and going on with variance and the covariance of data. So the most important responsibility for human beings, first of all, to know the context for which they are using AI, and secondly, to know from which perspective and from actually using what model or tool or framework they are dealing with a kind of advancement. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Farshad. As we are thinking about the time, I would like to finish this session. by thanking Professor Kyriakos for designing and offering this wonderful series of webinars at the GGG level. Also, I would like to thank Professor Tillman, who joined us from Gisma University of Applied Sciences, and Dr. Farshad, Dean of the Faculty of Computer Science, also Dr. Okan, who joined us from Hamburg, Interim Dean of the Faculty of Creative Arts, and all of you who were beside us in this meeting. And hopefully in March, we will have another session, another webinar, and you will be invited. And your thoughtful questions were also very helpful in running the session. Thank you very much. And if you have any comments or questions, you can send me a message on Teams or send me an email. I will communicate with the guest speakers, and we will back to you. Thank you very much. Professor?
Thank you so much. It was a wonderful session. Actually, you were right. We need to probably repeat that, and maybe we can integrate some practical examples as well. And why not, in some of these sessions, we can also invite a group of students to tell us their opinion as well, because I think in certain areas there are steps above us already, and we're a little bit behind. But anyway, thank you so much, and hope to see you soon in the next series. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much.